Thank you so much for taking the time to attend our webinar today. We're going to be focusing on the Ubiquiti firewall and security setup, very much a technical webinar. My name is Alex, I'm Leaders National Trainer. I'll be taking you guys through this presentation today. We'll be looking at a fair number of videos as well during the course of this, so we can see the actual real-world deployment. And I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples to look at and to review. With that said, we are also going to record the session today, so if you want to view this afterwards or if the video isn't playing back smoothly across the webinar, please feel free to check out our YouTube channel as well. I'll link that at the end, where we post the videos, and obviously there won't be any jerkiness to the video on there. So again, very much technically focused today. Many of the technical topics that we cover today kind of overlaps to some of the topics that we've covered in the past. So if there's something that you would like to go into more depth on, please do check out some of our other videos as well, as I'm sure we've covered a lot of those topics already. And of course, our YouTube channel is available for that as well. So as with all of the webinars this year, suggestions are most welcome. Please feel free to send through any comments or suggestions you might have. You can either post it as a comment onto this webinar, or you can send it through to us on webinars@leadersystems.com.au. This video today and the videos that I've shot are all recorded on the UDM Pro SE. The interface should be similar regardless of which device you're using. So if you're using a UDR or UDM, regular UDM, or a normal UDM Pro, the setup should be fairly similar. And again, if the video looks jerky, please do check out the YouTube channel to have that corrected. Some of the topics we'll be covering today, just very quickly. We're just going to do a very quick topology overview of how I've set up my environment. We're going to look at traffic management rules. We're going to see how we create different routes. We're going to take a look at the security settings. We're going to do a firewall setup example to show you guys the most common stuff that we typically run through. We're going to look at port and IP groups, and then we're also going to look at session rules. Very much technically focused, and with that, we're going to delve straight into it. There's no talk around products here. So we're going to start off by just taking a look at our topology. So very simple, what I've got set up today is just a UDM Pro SE. I've got a USW switch connected to this. And as you can see right now, everything is in its default state. So the UAP is there as well, and it's connected just on the default network 192.168.1 dot whatever. I am going to change our topology slightly and just create some networks. So I've already pre-created my networks here. So I've set up a corporate network. My default network is typically used for managing my devices, and my corporate network would be my standard network that my users would use in a business. What I've done is I've separated all of my networks out into separate VLANs. So I've got networks on VLAN 10, 20, and 30. I've got a guest network set up as well, which is what we're looking at right now. And some basic parameters configured on this already. I've also got a VoIP network just to simulate what a normal business deployment would look like. And again, everything's separated out by VLANs, but at the moment, there is no rule set up to really separate out the traffic, except for guest hotspots. I've also set up the Wi-Fi just to have a corporate Wi-Fi and a guest Wi-Fi. Later on, I'll do a VoIP Wi-Fi as well, which is not really a real world scenario, but just to show some of the rules being applied. And you'll see again there, I've got my guest network applied, my bandwidth profile set to guest Wi-Fi, and my network type also set to guest as well. We'll look at bandwidth profiles quickly as well. So we normally recommend setting up bandwidth profiles for most deployments. It's literally just in the profile section. And as you'll see here, we've also set up just a normal guest hotspot with a landing page, etc. So really very similar to how you would set up a real deployment. To set up a quick bandwidth profile to limit our corporate Wi-Fi to 50 megabit per second, and our guest Wi-Fi to 25 megabit per second, with no restrictions on the VoIP network. So that's our topology. That's what we have set up at the moment. This will change slightly as we start applying rules, but we'll see how that changes as we get to it. So next up, let's take a look at traffic management rules. So the easiest way to apply rules on Ubiquiti right now is by doing basic traffic management rules. It's a very nice and easy way to do it. It takes away a lot of the complicated setup procedures that is typically required for firewalls, and essentially it guides you through the process of restricting or blocking certain types of traffic, or even restricting certain types of traffic as well. The one we're going to be going to first here is traffic management. And you'll see there's one for rules and one for routes. So this is by far the most recommended options from Ubiquiti, as it's the simplest. The first thing we can do here is very simple ad blocking. So ad blocking is quite effective on Ubiquiti, and it's built in by default. If you want a detailed overview of what that ad blocking includes, Ubiquiti does have a page indicating that. And through this, we also have a couple of parameters as well. So we can do, for example, set what levels of information we want to display in the interface. The first one I'm going to do here is just create a very basic rule. So very simple, we can choose whether we want to block, allow, or speed limit a certain type of traffic, or even as far as a certain type of application or domain or region. We can even do this across an entire network. So this is probably the easiest way to apply any settings. The ones we're going to be using is app groups, and domain names primarily, but you can also extend this to a specific IP address. You can apply this to a specific region. You can apply it globally to, for example, your entire internet, or you can even do it across just a specific network that you've selected as well. So with this, it's really intuitive the way that they've done it. And again, I've got it set to block at the moment, but I can very easily do this to allow or speed limit something. The first thing I'm going to do here is just app groups. And what I'll do is I'll create a quick app group rule to say I'm blocking online games, social media, and peer-to-peer networks on this network. Let's say it's a work network. I can choose where this gets applied to. Does it get applied to a specific device, or does it get applied across an entire network? So does it get applied to my entire corporate network, for example, which in business solution would be the real scenario. I can also choose when this gets applied. It can either be on always, or I can say specific days of the week, or at a specific time. So let's say, for example, between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., no one's allowed to access any of this content. So normal work hours blocking. And all I do is I add this rule in, and away we go. So really simple to create basic rules to block or restrict certain types of traffic. So that was an application group. We can also do it per application as well. So if you notice there's a user misusing a specific type of application, so let's say in this example, someone is playing a lot of Call of Duty at the office, which they should not be doing, you can actually go search for that application, and it's listed on that drop-down. You can say, for example, that it's only one user, or it's only on the guest network where this really occurs, and I want to restrict this. And I can say no one should be able to play Call of Duty on the guest network, and we're just going to go and add this rule in. Job done. Extremely easy to add rules into this. In a business environment, you can very flexibly then select the type of apps you want to block, type of application groups. You can block specific domain names if you find employees abusing specific networks. I can say, for example, that no one is allowed to reach the Leader Systems website, or bad domain in this one, and just add that to my list. It doesn't need to be the full FQDN. It can just be a simple domain. I've just typed it in wrong there. But essentially, I can block out different domains there and add them in as I want to. I can also add them in batches. So if you have a file that you want to import, you can absolutely do that. And of course, this doesn't just extend to blocking. You can say, for example, that everything's blocked and you only allow certain things. If you do IP address blocking, you can do it either via a specific IP address and a port number, or you can do it an IP address range as well. So as an IP address range, you can say the entire range of IP addresses from X to X should be blocked. So really intuitive the way they've done that, and again, nice and simple to set this up. A very common thing is to set up region blocking as well. So you can say, for example, people on my corporate network aren't allowed to connect to Antarctica. specifically selected that so that it doesn't bother anyone. And essentially what we're going to say is we can say either we block it or we speed limit all traffic going to the specific region. So in this instance, we can say, for example, this cell phone should have a speed limit from reaching any type of traffic in Antarctica, and we can set up the limiting or the blocking as we want there. We can, of course, do internet as well, so we can just straight up restrict speed limits or straight up apply speed limits to a specific device if we want to restrict their throughput only for one specific device. So extremely easy, and again, everything here is it's fairly intuitive. I think most people will figure this out. If you've worked on the Ubiquiti interfaces, you'll be able to figure this out very quickly. What's really impressive to me here is the scheduling as well, and that you can make this only apply during certain times of day as well. We can even take it a step further, and if we go to local network, we can select some of our pre-made networks from this list. And we can even go as far as saying that a specific traffic direction should be blocked. So we can say traffic from all local networks or traffic to the specific local network should be blocked if it's trying to reach X device, etc. So it's really powerful the way they've done this. And to add rules, you literally just go add rules. You can obviously manage these rules and pause them as well should you wish. So I think I'm going to do one final rule here. I can't remember exactly what we're blocking. So it's just again as an example of stuff that people would normally do. No, that's actually the end of it. So, but extremely powerful. I love the way that they've implemented this. I think, to be honest, this is one of the easiest platforms that I've ever seen to do blocking. But of course, this is not very granular. So if we want more granular control around this, we would have to apply more rules or routes. So next up, let's take a look at how the routes functionality would actually work. And you'll see, again, similar to before, it's just a route section. I can say, for example, here that it should be a specific type of traffic or all traffic coming from a network or a device. So let's say, for example, here that I want to take all the traffic coming from my corporate network, and I want that to go out across a specific interface. So I can say either across WAN 1 or WAN 2. I can set the route for that traffic. And in this instance, I can say this is my primary link, and I want all traffic to go across that. And what I can do now as well is I can say I have a secondary link for my guest network, which is low throughput, and I just want to put my guests onto there, and I can just say everything on WAN 2 should go across to that WAN interface. Where the real power comes in here for me is the ability to actually route traffic across your VPNs as well. So I've created the secondary link there just as non-critical traffic. And what I can do now is I can say that a specific device or a specific traffic should go across my VPN always. So let's say my notebook, for example, here should always go across my VPN, but I don't want the rest of my network to go across the VPN. I can very specifically add that in. Or I can say that if I'm trying to access a specific domain, IP address, or region, that it should go across a VPN. That is extremely powerful. So a lot of the times we establish a VPN and we can set our device here into VPN client mode, but we want certain traffic types to override the VPN. So if I'm trying to access local content, for example, it doesn't make sense to have VPN in place. I'd rather access that local content locally. And essentially I can block that traffic from going across the regular WAN, across the VPN, and just set it to go across my regular LAN if I want to. And again, I can do this for regions, I can do this for pretty much everything. I can say what type of traffic should go across which interface. Very simple, again, to set this up, and loads of flexibility around this as well. So you'll have the different VPN options there. So both as a VPN client, site-to-site VPN, etc., should all come appear in that list as a interface to select. So next up, we can take a quick look at security and enabling security functionality, as well as basic firewall rules. So in terms of security, Ubiquiti make this again very straightforward. To enable security, it's literally just a tick button to say what you want on, and then we are going to work through the different firewall rules as well. So by default, your device should have a whole bunch of firewall rules created already based on the networks that you've created. So it should automatically create certain rules based on the type of network you've created, the domains you've set up, subdomains you've set up, etc., etc. We're going to look at that in a sec. The most important ones here, and I recommend this for pretty much any deployment, is I would typically set up country restrictions. I would typically say block certain regions that I know are prone to causing a lot of attacks. In this instance, we'll say Antarctica or Australia is a bad actor. What we can do as well is we can say, for example, that all traffic should be blocked, but we're only going to allow a specific type of traffic. So we're only going to allow traffic from Australia, and we are going to block traffic from Antarctica, as an example. We say how we want to block this as well. So is it outgoing, incoming, or in both directions? In terms of threat management, Ubiquiti have again made this really simple. We can choose to either enable detect only or detect and block. Just whenever you're setting this up, it does impact your maximum WAN throughput. So do check out for this as well. It can potentially, if you have a really high speed connection, can potentially cause problems for you in terms of throughput. The threat categories that are built into the interface by default, you can go research what this entails exactly. The ones that are most prominently or typically configured or deconfigured would be stuff like your peer-to-peer, your TFTP traffic, your POP3 traffic, SMTP traffic, and even stuff like VoIP. So if you're experiencing problems with VoIP, a good option here is to detect one of these settings. So VoIP is right at the bottom there, and test whether you're experiencing any latencies or any issues if you detect this option. But this is basically just the threat categories that Ubiquiti will check for known threats. I can also choose whether I want to enable or disable dark web blocking, and I can also block known malicious sites. Again, every rule that we apply there or every traffic type that we attempt to block does use more processing power on the device as well. I can also choose how the actions or the alerts are logged and whether I want to receive information around certain alerts or certain blocking events that have occurred. So in terms of that security, it's not, and I always say this in every webinar that I do, Ubiquiti is not a replacement for your traditional UTM. You would still have something like a WatchGuard or something like that in place. What Ubiquiti really is good at is for small to medium businesses where they don't have the budget to afford a big UTM appliance, but they do need basic security. All businesses need security. So this is a very good option for that, where the Ubiquiti can actually do a lot of that protection and filtering. The best part about this is there's no annual fee. So unlike a traditional UTM where you have to pay monthly for the updates, there's no fee for this. So really cool to see that included free of charge with Ubiquiti. So before making any type of firewall changes, we need to make a quick change to our topology here. So what I've done is I've taken my devices and I've essentially put them into 3 different networks. So I've taken my notebook and I've put that onto my guest network, and it's in the 10.0.20 range, and it's also on the same VLAN. And then I've put my little Mac Mini on the corporate network in VLAN 10, and then I've got my cell phone on my VoIP network, which is in the 10.0.30 range, and obviously on the 30 VLAN as well. One thing to note here is if I'm on my Mac Mini doing this test, if I do a test and try to ping other gateways, I can still do that. So even though I've set up VLANs, my Mac Mini is actually capable of pinging both the default gateway, which is the router's gateway, as well as other gateways for the other networks. So I'm able to reach the VoIP network, the guest network, and I can potentially transmit data to those networks as well. If I try to reach a device on the, let's say, for example, the VoIP network, I can actually do that. So from my Mac Mini, traffic can transverse to my VoIP network as well. If I try to go to the guest network, whenever we set up guest networks, so this one specifically is going to be 20.120, whenever we set up guest networks, Ubiquiti automatically creates default firewall rules to block inter VLAN traffic. And as you can see there, I've tried pinging that device, and that default, because it's in a guest network and the network type that I've selected is a guest network, it's blocking that traffic from reaching the client devices, although it can still reach the gateway of that network. So most businesses, we would want to prevent this. We don't want a user in our corporate network and our normal business wireless to be able to reach stuff in our VoIP network. And we wouldn't want, for example, IoT devices to reach anything else in our corporate network, etc., etc. So we want to try and limit or block inter VLAN traffic as much as possible. And the other thing I normally recommend is blocking access to the Ubiquiti interfaces as well. So if they can reach that domain, or if they can reach that gateway, so let's say a VoIP client on the VoIP network can reach 10.0.30.1, which is the default gateway that's set up on that. Potentially they can log into the Ubiquiti interface if they had known the password. So really what we're trying to do is block traffic from reaching those other destinations. And this is primarily what we'd actually use the firewall rules for in Ubiquiti right now. Yes, you can also use those firewall rules to block certain internet traffic types, etc., but primarily it's the most use cases that I've seen is for internal routing and internal blocking, which is what we're going to do as well. Before we set up the rules, we need to first discuss the rule types. Again, I'm using a UDM here because it's easier to visualize, and you'll have to excuse my drawing. I'll try to draw here, although my drawing is akin to a 4-year-old, so please do forgive me for this. So the first type of traffic we need to look at, or the type of definitions that we'll see in the interface, is we will see that there's a couple of rule options. For first one is going to be internet. We're going to see LAN, and then we're going to see guest, and then we'll see the same thing again, but for IPv6 at the end. So just as a very quick definition of all of these options that you'll see in the firewall rules. So internet refers to everything on the WAN side of things. So that would be everything on this interface. On the UDM Pro SE, it would be this one as well. And in, out, and local determines the type of traffic or the direction of the traffic. So internet in would be everything coming into the WAN interface from the internet. Internet out would be everything leaving the WAN interface, going to the internet. And internet local would be everything coming from the internet externally and attempting to reach my actual appliance, my, in this instance, UDM Pro SE. So by default, that internet local option would just dump all the traffic because you don't want traffic from the internet to be able to hit the UDM that you use as your gateway. So essentially, the primary ones that we'll look at is internet in and internet out. If we look at LAN, so LAN by default, so Ubiquiti in the interface call it LAN, and it essentially refers to IPv4 LAN. Anything that just says IPv6, it's exactly the same rules. So you'll see internet IPv6, LAN IPv6, and guest IPv6. It just means it's using the IPv6 version of the protocol. So LAN and LAN in specifically is what we will primarily be talking about. So LAN in would be all the traffic going into the specific interfaces, and LAN out would be traffic leaving a specific LAN interface. LAN local is for any type of traffic that is trying to reach my UDM. So the majority of the rules that we apply would be on LAN in, and what we're trying to do is say if traffic comes into my device or my appliance, what should happen to that traffic and what state should that traffic be in order for this rule to apply. So really that's the most basic form of it. With guest, it's pretty much the exact same thing. It's in the exact same drawing applies. It just means it's for the guest network. So Ubiquiti often refer to your LAN as your corporate and your guest as just obviously a guest network. And when we're setting up the interfaces, you'll see that you obviously have the option to say it's a guest network or not. And everything that applies to the guest network, it's basically just more restrictive. So what we're trying to do is we're applying the rules to this traffic in the directions that it's going in. And the next thing we'll quickly do is we'll take a look at the connection state as well. So you'll see as a rule at the bottom, you'll have an option to say what the state of that connection is. So new state would be all new traffic that is attempting to traverse the network. An established connection or established state would essentially be an existing connection where the packets are already flowing. Related basically refers to any type of packet that is new, but the connection is an existing connection. And the last one there is invalid, which means it doesn't abide by any of the other states that we've seen. So the reason we need to talk about this is because we can say whether we want the firewall rule to only apply to a specific connection state. So I can say, for example, that I want to block all LAN traffic coming into a specific port, but I just want it to be all new traffic. All the existing traffic should stay in place. That comes with a little bit of caveats, and it requires a bit of testing. And you'll see throughout the setup of this as well, I don't exactly nail some of the configurations, but that's done on purpose, or so we'll say. Let's quickly take a look at port and IP groups as well, because this is extremely important when you're trying to set up rules. So basically, it's a way to apply firewall rules faster or in bulk. In the examples that we have here, we can say that I want to apply a rule that blocks traffic on specific ports. So let's say 80 or 443 or 222 or whatever. Instead of going and creating a rule that specifically just blocks HTTP traffic and then creating a separate rule to block HTTPS traffic, etc., 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 what I can do is I can create a group, and I can group port numbers or IP addresses together. I can say, for example, that I want to group these IP addresses or IP address ranges together, and I don't want, or I do want something to apply to this. So this is extremely powerful for simplifying your rules so that you don't have thousands of rules just to block one specific IP address, one specific port. So before making any firewall changes, it's a good idea to set rules on how we're going to treat the established and connected sessions first. So normally to do this, what I will do is I'll go create a new rule. And what I should be applying this to is LAN in. I've accidentally skipped over that. So the type there should be LAN in. I've just left it as internet in in the video. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to allow our established and related sessions to continue on and ignore the rules that we are applying after this. The order of the rules here is important as well, and we'll see that in a second. So with this, all I'm going to do is I just say that it's LAN in. I'm going to say my state is manual, and I want to say all traffic that matches the state of new and matches the state of related is, sorry, not state new, matches the state of established and matches the state of related. The rule would apply to that type of traffic only. And we're going to see how this pans out in a sec. Next, what I'm going to do is, again, similar, I'm going to go LAN in. And all I want to do here is I want to drop all of the traffic that is invalid. So essentially, if the state is in an invalid state, I want that traffic to drop. And that's why I said drop the traffic there as well. So state invalid and action drop. And I'm essentially just going to apply this. Okay. So with that, it basically handles how the connected or what the current sessions are going to do when a new firewall's rule is created, and whether it's going to be dropping that traffic or whether it's going to keep the connection in place. The first thing I'm doing here as well is I'm just quickly creating a profile. This is just a port profile to list all of the private IP addresses that I'm going to use for other rules that I will be setting up in a second. What I can do here is we know my networks are in the 10 range, so I can list either 10.0.10. Whatever .0 and list my subnets, or I can do this across the entire range, and I can go, I want to apply a specific rule to 10.0.0-24, in which case it will be everything with a IP address that's in the 10 dot range. I'll add that in, apply, and essentially I've now got a group set up, so I can go apply firewall rules to, or that incorporate that specific group. So the rule we're creating is to block all traffic from anything in the 10 dot range to any other devices in the 10 dot range. So the primary reason for this is we want to restrict traffic between different VLANs. So as we saw earlier, I've got a client device in VLAN 10 and it's capable of reaching VLAN 20. So I want to block that, and I want to block that into VLAN routing. The way I would do this is, firstly, I'm just going to go LAN in. Again, everything applied on LAN in. I'm going to just give it a name so I can logically remember this, and I'll say block VLAN to VLAN traffic. We can say whether the rules applied before the existing rules or after, what the action is. In this case, I'm saying I'm going to drop the traffic. If the IP address range is in the 10 dot whatever range, that's the group that I've just created, and the destination is in the 10 dot whatever range, again, that group that I've just created. So essentially, if the traffic's coming from 10 dot anything, and it's attempting to go to 10 dot anything, it should block that traffic. So if I go test this, theoretically speaking, I should now have inter-VLAN traffic blocked. Specifically, this will only be from client device to client device. If I try to reach gateways outside of my own VLAN, I can still do that. I can reach the primary gateway, 192.168.1.1, or alternatively, if I try to hit 10.0.10.1 or one of the other gateways, I can still do that. But what I'm blocking here is I'm blocking my Mac Mini in this instance from accessing the phone, and I'll go try to ping that client specifically, and you'll see with that rule set up, it's applied and it's blocking traffic from reaching that client device. But if I try to ping that gateway, it can still ping the gateway. Realistically, we want to typically avoid having stuff still being able to reach the gateways as well, and we're actually going to create a firewall rule for that specifically. So to do this, we are again going to just apply a whole bunch of firewall rules. So this is just the profiles. So we're going to set up a quick firewall profile here, IP port profile. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say block all of my VoIP traffic from reaching either its own gateway or gateways in a different network. In this instance, I'm going to block traffic from my VoIP network from reaching the gateways on other VLANs or other networks. And to do this, I'm simply creating a quick group, and my VoIP network is in the 30 range, so I'm going to list all the other gateways that I do not want the device to be able to reach. So I'm going to say 10.0.10 and 10.0.20, and the gateway addresses ends with 1. And I'm going to block the primary gateway here as well. So I'm going to block 192.168.1.1 as well. So this is just a group, no firewall rules applied just yet. I'm just going to save this group so I can keep this for later. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another group, and I'm going to block the access to the interface of the UDM. So that's a very common thing as well. I want to say that anything on my VoIP network shouldn't be able to reach the interface of my UDM or my own gateway. So in this instance, my gateway would be on 10.0.30.1, and I can add that in. I noticed later that this rule didn't apply correctly, so I'm assuming I did something wrong here, but there's another way to do this as well. And the next one I'm going to do, essentially all I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate this for my corporate network, and I'm going to replicate this for all the other networks that I would typically have. So what we're attempting to block is access to other gateways and access to the Ubiquiti's interface as well. I would typically go a step further. So as you'll see, I've created one for my corporate network and for my VoIP network. And I would typically go take this one step further and create one to specifically block access to specific port types. So I'll say I'm going to attempt to block HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH, and I'm going to add port numbers in here. I messed this up at first, so the way to do this is you would type 80 and then go add, and then 443 add, and I actually forgot to add 22 in the end there, which is your SSH, but essentially I'm attempting to block those port numbers. And now I can actually go apply these firewall rules just using those specific groups. So to go apply the rules, what I'm going to do first is back to firewalls, create a new rule. I misclicked on create a firewall a profile there first, and then go create new rule. Okay, what we're going to do again is we're going to say LAN in. So, sorry, I'm incorrect here. So it's actually LAN local. LAN local is the traffic attempting to reach the interface of the UDM. In other words, traffic going to the UDM itself. And I'm going to give this a name so that I can remember this logically later. I'm going to say block VoIP to the gateway. In other words, any guest on or any clients on the guest network shouldn't be able to reach the gateway. The action is to drop that traffic, and the source should be my VoIP network, and the destination should obviously be the gateway. But instead of typing in the IP address of the gateway, I'm just using the groups that I've created. So I'm just going to go block all the VoIP gateways, or block all the other gateways essentially. And that group consisted of the other gateways in the other networks. And I don't need to apply anything else after that, just go apply and done. And what I'm going to do in this one as well is I'm going to, instead of going LAN in, what I'm doing is again LAN local. I'm going to give this a description. So I'm going to block all the corporate traffic from reaching its own gateway, similar to how I did before. I'm going to say the source is my corporate network, and the destination is going to be, again, that group that I've created. You'll see my port or IP group here, and that's going to be the corporate gateways. So that will be, essentially it's blocking out the VoIP gateway there, and it's blocking out the guest gateway by having those as part of that group. So what is cool about this is it doesn't impact the rest of your traffic. So if I apply a rule to say it should only be applicable to traffic attempting to go from one network to another network, if I block stuff like HTTPS, etc., it's obviously not gonna affect my traffic going to the internet, because it's only if the port and destination matches. So the next rule I'm going to create here quickly is I want to block access to my actual interface. So this is the HTTPS traffic or HTTP traffic, the actual interface of the UDM. So I'm going to just say block VoIP to UDM. And again, my traffic type is going to be LAN local. In other words, traffic getting to the UDM. I'm going to say the source needs to be my VoIP network that I'm applying this to. And the destination is going to be the interface of my UDM. And I've already created that group. I'm going to say block VoIP to gateway, I block VoIP to interface specifically. And I'm going to apply a port group of HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. Those are the port numbers that I set up earlier. And I would essentially do the same thing again, just for my corporate network as well. So this means that any user connecting either on my VoIP network or on my corporate network won't actually see or have the ability to reach my UDM's interface. So it's blocked it off. And although I've blocked port 80 and 443, etc., it's only if the traffic direction is from my corporate network to my UDM's interface. So Pretty straightforward, again, to go add all this in, apply changes. A lot of the time after you've applied one of these changes, I do recommend just double checking them. And they do sometimes take a bit of time to apply as well. So here's me quickly double checking one of these rules. And I'm going to quickly test. So first, I'm going to test if I can reach one of the other clients, and then I also want to test if I can reach the other gateways. So I'm going to do this from my Mac Mini, and I'm going to try to reach the other gateways and other devices quick. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ping to, I think it was my web phone, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. So I'm going to try to reach the default gateway first. So 192.168.1.1. So it's now not allowing access from my Mac to that default gateway. The next thing I can do is I can try to ping something that is outside of my network. I can ping 20.1, which is in the guest network, and it's blocked. And I can attempt to do this for client devices, etc., as well. So 30.1 is blocked, and essentially those rules are taking effect. So this is the one rule that didn't apply correctly, so 10.0.10.1. But because I've got the port numbers blocked as well, so because I've blocked port number 80, 8443, etc. as well, so if someone tried to reach my UDM, even though they can ping that UDM, it wouldn't be able to actually reach the interface if someone attempted it. Sorry, I know I'm a little bit over time, but we're almost done. Last slide. And then just quickly, a couple of rule options here as well. If you're, let's take a step back on that quickly. If you're attempting to set up rules, this is essentially all the baseline rules that I would typically recommend. So what we've done is we've blocked inter-VLAN traffic. In other words, clients between the different VLANs cannot reach each other. We've also blocked access between different devices on different gateways. So that one device on VLAN 10 can't reach the gateway of VLAN 20. And we've blocked access to the UDM's interface as well. So this is a very common scenario. This is stuff that we would typically set up. The order of the rules here does have an impact. It's always applied in a top-down fashion. You can play around with these rules as well. Ubiquiti does the sorting automatically, but you can change this if you want. You'll also see there's a whole bunch of default rules which cannot be adjusted that is set up by Ubiquiti by default. So if I go to the rules here and I attempted to change the order of this, just know that it will process the rules from the top down. I can obviously go apply rules going out as well. So I can say, for example, that I want to block all traffic or all UDP traffic going out towards the internet as a stupid example of a rule. I can go essentially apply this to specific interfaces and apply this to specific rule types, etc. And try to attempt to block certain traffic types or even specific IP addresses, etc. So I can block all of that through here. So really, this is just a tiny cross-section of what is possible here. The reason we don't go into a 2-hour-long webinar on this is because there's a million unique different combinations of how you can set this up. This is just some of what we've seen most frequently set up where people are using VLANs and might not be aware that you can actually reach across multiple VLANs. I hope that's answered some of your questions. I'm going to work through the questions you guys have in a second. Just before I do that, if you are interested in this topic and would like to know more, we do cover this in the Ubiquiti training as well. We have the training dates up there. Some of them have already gone, but we do have training pretty much throughout the entire state, throughout the entire country in every state, pretty much every month. So please do join us at one of our future training sessions. And you are able to register on our Leader Academy site as well. Like I said, we've already done a ton of webinars as well. So if you see anything in this list that is of interest, the video is already on YouTube. It is on our Leader Academy site as well, should you wish to go view that video. So we've discussed radius, we've discussed scarce hotspots, obviously firewall security, access point steering techniques, etc. So lots of videos out already. And if you are interested, we still have a ton of webinars coming up as well. That website again is leader-academy.com.au.